Everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. If you've been following the case of the fake candidate down in Florida, you know it is beyond convoluted, and there may actually be more than one fake candidate involved. What started out as an investigation into one ghost candidate being paid by a former Republican lawmaker to siphon votes away from the Democrat in the race has now morphed into an intricate, seemingly massively widespread effort to undermine numerous elections in 2020. And one of the most recent new threads that investigators began to pull involved a dark money group called Floridians for Equality and Justice. You probably recognize that name because I've talked about them in a couple of segments in the past and how that organization spent at least $160,000 on mailers that attacked, among others, Democrat Patricia Sigmund. The mailers also promoted a so-called progressive, a woman named Justine Iannotti. That's the woman who, you will recall, if you've been watching these segments, fled the country and moved to Sweden shortly after the election. Not suspicious at all, right? And she had all of her paperwork ready to go and set up her whole move before the election. So she knew she was moving out of the country before the race. But anyway, Sigmund ended up losing that race to Republican Jason Brodeur. I talked about him in another segment, who also, Brodeur, by the way, has ties to Matt Gigantic Cranium Gates. And Democratic State Senator Annette Taddeo tried to sue Floridians for Equality and Justice to find out who paid for the attack ads because she was also one of their targets. Well, now new information has surfaced about this Floridians for Equality and Justice, as well as Stephen Jones, the man who was listed as the chairperson of that group. One thing we're learning is that Floridians for Equality and Justice went out of their way to create the appearance that they were a left-leaning organization. For example, they didn't pay bills directly out of their coffers. They didn't cut checks in that name. They funneled the payments through a limited liability corporation to pay for all of their expenses. So Floridians for Equality and Justice sent money over to an LLC that they named Victory Blue Group LLC. And then the payments went out from there. So it looked as though a Democratic group was funding these mailers, right? To make it look legitimate. And even though Floridians for Equality and Justice spent nearly $200,000 promoting a so-called progressive in the 2020 primary, and their website states that their mission is to, quote, educate and highlight dynamic progressive issues across the state of Florida. So we know this is a bunch of bull. The organization and its chair have extensive ties to the Republican Party and Republican politics in Florida in general. According to the Orlando Sentinel, Stephen Jones is being represented by an attorney named Richard Coates, Coates. Who is Coates? He is one of the leading Republican elections attorneys in Tallahassee, Florida. In fact, he's represented Republican politicians throughout the state. And Coates just so happens to have done work for candidate Jason Brodeur in 2020, the Republican who just so happens to have benefited from these dark money funds and these seemingly fake candidate flyers, and the seemingly fake candidacy of Justine Iannotti, because it was Brodeur, Iannotti, and then the actual Democrat in the race, Sigmund. So Brodeur won, Iannotti skipped out to Sweden, and yeah, the Democrat lost. And now there was a bigger spread than in another case. So if Justine Iannotti wasn't running, Brodeur may have won anyway, but she definitely did take some of the votes. And if they find out that she was paid to do so, that is illegal. And then there's another attorney, back to this other thing, there's another attorney who's also representing this guy, the Stephen Jones guy. It's an attorney named Ben Gibson. And he's representing, like I said, Jones and also Floridians for Equality and Justice. Now, Gibson served as general counsel to the Republican Party of Florida in 2020, and he's currently a Ron DeSantis appointee for the State Board of Education. So this guy is not a Democrat. He's not a progressive. They were not working on behalf of progressives. In addition, as I previously mentioned, Florida for Equality and Justice chairperson Stephen Jones is the son of William Stafford Jones. The elder Jones, Mr. Stafford Jones, is a well-known political consultant who has worked with Data Targeting Inc. That is the organization that received over $7 million just during the 2020 elections from the Florida Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. That's the campaign committee that is responsible for getting Republicans elected. So they paid Data Targeting Inc. $7 million just last year to help them win elections. And then what do you know? This guy's dad has done work with them. And you may also recall that Data Targeting Inc. was paying Frank Artiles $15,000 a month during that same period of time. Artiles is, of course, the aforementioned former Republican lawmaker who has now been indicted for paying Alex Rodriguez to run as a fake candidate to swing the election to the Republican in the race. So he is the fake candidate who tipped this whole thing off, who started this whole downward spiral and got this whole investigation going. Now, in addition to the civil lawsuit brought by Democrat Annette Taddeo, Stephen Jones and his organization were also under fire for violating state election laws. So the Florida Elections Commission became involved in this case. And unfortunately, here's some bad news. They've struck a deal with Jones, and it's not good. The Orlando Sentinel is reporting that the commission was investigating his organization for almost a half a dozen violations. However, in the end, because it's Florida, is what I say, they decided to only hold Jones and his organization responsible for one single violation, which was failing to state which candidate they would be supporting before they formed their group. So they dropped all the meaningful statutes that he had violated, and they kept this one meaningless one. So they found that Jones didn't have to disclose his group's donors due to a BS technicality and a loophole, which the Orlando Sentinel said was, quote, created by two conflicting state laws regulating a type of political advertising known as electioneering communication. So in the end, this guy, Jones, who played these games, his organization, the committee gave him a $250 fine. You heard that right. Not $250,000, just $250 and no jail time. So let's hope that the civil lawsuit will bring about some actual justice, that we'll get some answers, maybe through the discovery process. Floridians for Equality and Justice has until this week to respond to the complaint. So I'll let you guys know when I hear more, but this is ridiculous. Like I said, it's Florida. So we all know how things are going down there. Not good, to say the least. It's cray cray. Anybody with any sanity needs to get out of there immediately. But yeah, this whole thing is just a mess, and it seems to involve a lot of people and a lot of different groups. So I'll keep you posted on all of this. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Take care, and I'll talk with you soon.